Hey rich girls, Kirby here, and today we are going to discuss how you should be handling money and finances as a couple. Now, I know the topic of money can be touchy in any relationship, especially romantic ones, and I'm not gonna lie, I got a little heated near the end of today's episode. I have a lot of thoughts when it comes to handling finances as a couple, and I did not hold back. I did, however, put together a really cool exercise that you can do with your partner, and I am super excited to share that with you today. By the end of today's episode, you will be able to put together a game plan on how to tackle the topic of finances within your relationship. This is Rich Girl's Guide, where we demystify the world of personal finance to help you create a financially successful and fulfilling life. I'm your host, Kirby Delicano, and I worked in wealth management for over 6 years before leaving the office to focus on my business and my family. Before we get started, I want to quickly let you know that even if you are not currently in a relationship, definitely still give this episode a listen. I think pretty much all of the talking points in today's episode can be applied to any kind of relationship that involves money. So a relationship with your parents, with roommates, siblings, or even yourself. It does not just have to be a romantic relationship. Obviously, romantic relationships tend to be the most intense and can be the most tumultuous when it comes to money and finances. I swear, 1 in every 4 true crime episode ends with, and she took out a $2 million life insurance policy just 1 week before his mysterious death.
Don't be suspicious, don't be suspicious, don't be suspicious, don't be suspicious.
But I think if you took 30 seconds to just think back on any close relationships you've had over the years, romantic or not, money probably came up on more than one occasion. But just because money and finances can cause friction within relationships does not mean that they have to. And while it may take some initial work to break bad habits within the relationship, keeping up conversations around money can actually bring you closer together in the long run. One more quick thing. Of course, this episode is for any and all genders, but I will definitely be focusing on resources for women and those who identify as female. Statistically speaking, and from personal experience, women are much more likely to get taken advantage of emotionally, physically, and unfortunately, financially. So I will be sharing resources. I'll be sharing some personal opinions on what kind of behavior might be assigned to leave the relationship. And I would also urge anyone listening to keep their friends and family in mind. You might start thinking about a particular person in your life throughout this episode who could be experiencing some of the red flags that we will discuss. If that's the case, feel free to send them this episode. Maybe sit down and have a conversation with them, or just let them know that you're thinking about them and you're willing to lend some listening ears if and when they ever want to talk. On a lighter note, near the end of the episode, I'm going to rapid fire off some controversial thoughts I have specifically within romantic relationships, so stay tuned for that. When sitting down to write this episode, my mind kind of went in a million different directions, and I realized I was starting to spiral into some deep rabbit holes. So I started collecting my thoughts into categories, and I ended up making this Venn diagram type of thing that really captured what I think is important when it comes to relationships and money, and how to best come together to discuss money as a unit. Okay, I want you to visualize 2 overlapping circles. The circle on the left represents your financial goals. Financial goals that affect both you and your partner. The circle on the right represents compromise. These are things you'd be willing to compromise on in order to reach your financial goals listed on the left. In the middle, where the circles overlap, we have non-negotiables. Non-negotiables are something that you're absolutely not willing to budge on. This would be something like having kids or not having kids. This will be very different for everyone, and those non-negotiables will probably give you the most insight into how aligned you are with your partner. Now, you cannot list every single one of your goals as non-negotiable. That is a red freaking flag if I ever saw one. If you're listing out 10 or so goals in this exercise, you should realistically have no more than 2 to 3 non-negotiables. And of course, overhead we have communication. Because if we don't communicate our goals and what we are willing to compromise on, and more importantly, what we are not willing to compromise on, you and your partner are not going to be on the same page. The overarching theme throughout this episode is communication. You might be sick of this word by the end, but I don't care because communication is the backbone of any relationship. This is just magnified when it comes to money and finances. If you have a relationship where you don't, or you feel like you can't communicate about basic things like your needs, your emotions, your hopes and dreams, it is going to be very difficult to have any kind of open, honest discussion when it comes to money. Speaking of communication, I want to communicate my thanks to you for listening. I appreciate each and every one of you so much and would love for you to subscribe over on YouTube. If you can, I actually want you to go through this exercise right now. While you're drawing out your circles, remember 2 overlapping circles, I'll go over some examples. For financial goals, these can involve anything that will require money to pay for or some kind of money sacrifice. Going down the list of common financial goals for couples, buying a home, paying for children's college education, retiring early, lavish annual vacations, and not working on the weekends or after 5 o'clock. Obviously, these are going to look very different person to person and couple to couple. So take your time and write out your financial goals you have for you and your partner. Okay, so now let's go through some compromises someone might be willing to make in order to reach those financial goals. In order to buy a home, you will need to have cash on hand for a down payment. A compromise might be having a small, less expensive wedding in order to save money for the down payment. Paying for children's college education. I know this one might be a hot topic, and don't worry, I have an upcoming episode that focuses only on college. Obviously, college is a huge expense. The current average in-state tuition over a 4-year period averages out to just over $104,000. And that does not include food or off-campus housing. So to offset that cost, which you would most likely be saving for over a period of years, you might compromise by sending your kids to public school instead of private school leading up to college. Next, we have retiring early. You will obviously need to have a lot of extra money saved if this is a goal of yours. So a compromise may be working 60 hours a week while you are working, which could be overtime at the office or even picking up a second job. If your goal is to take a lavish vacation every year, I feel like that should be on everyone's list, then you might need to compromise by sticking to a strict budget throughout the year in order to have the funds for that vacation. If you watch my budgeting episode, then you know budgeting is not just for low-income folks. Budgeting should be utilized by everyone, even if you make a ton of money. You can take a look at that episode right here. However, some people are very budget averse, so not having to stick to a strict budget could be very well on someone's non-negotiable list. Finally, we have no work after 5 or on the weekends. This is probably pretty attainable for most office workers, but for a lot of people, they need to set strict boundaries in order to achieve this balance, and those boundaries may end up costing them down the line. A compromise to this would be consistently living below your means, since the prospect of getting bonuses or increased pay year over year is probably lower than your peers who are willing to work past 5 or on the weekends. So a common theme you may have seen emerge is the fact that pretty much all of these goals and compromises are either fairly large one-time life events like a wedding or an ongoing change in lifestyle such as sticking to a strict budget. Either way, you will want to make sure that you and your partner's goals somewhat align. Now, you do not have to agree 100% with your partner. In fact, I think that's kind of boring and doesn't leave much room for growth. But you do want to make sure that you and your partner are not complete opposites on your goals and compromises. If one of you have listed out goals that are all about hustling now and saving tons of money while spending little to none of it, and the other person has listed out goals that promote work-life balance and annual vacations and staying home with future kiddos, a deeper conversation about life goals needs to be had. A great way to initiate this conversation is by starting with one goal or one compromise that you both agree on, so that the conversation can start on a pleasant note with a common goal. Then you can move on to some goals that you don't quite see eye to eye on and discuss why that particular goal or compromise is important to you. The important thing to remember here is that you want to approach this exercise as a team. After all, the whole point of being with your partner is to work together as a team to help you both reach your common goals. If you come into this as trying to win against your partner, then I can almost guarantee you that neither of you will win. Again, this is not just for romantic partners. If you are having trouble getting on the same page with your roommate, your parent, your sibling, whatever, you can utilize this same exercise. Just make sure you are only listing out financial goals that would affect the two of you. Okay, the first red flag when it comes to communication is that one partner is not willing to sit down and even attempt this exercise. Now, you don't want to jump your partner and tell them that they have to do this exercise right this second. But if you give them a heads up that you have something important that you want to discuss, you set a period of time aside either later in the day or later in the week to talk about it. And once you two actually sit down to talk, they either laugh at you or dismiss the conversation altogether and completely avoid the discussion. That is definitely a red flag. Now, they may just need some time to come around to the idea of sitting down and having these kinds of conversations. But if you have tried multiple times in different ways over a period of time and they continue to table the discussion, it may be time to think more about your relationship as a whole. My mama bear is coming out today, so I'm just going to tell you how I see it. Now, a green flag here would be you bring up the exercise and your partner is initially put off by the idea and doesn't really want to do it. However, after you explain that this is important to you and they have time to think about it, they eventually come around to the idea and agree to try the exercise or do some kind of modified version that still gets the two of you talking about your financial goals. Your partner may just not be used to talking about money with other people, even those close to them. And the fact that they are willing to try something new for the sake of you and your relationship is a really good green flag. Big green flag here, and you might just have a keeper on your hands. Now, let's say you and your partner try this exercise and you realize that there are a lot of conflicts between your goals and your compromises. Some red flags here would be that your partner is belittling your goals, they are unwilling to make any compromises on either of their lists, and are insisting that their goals are the only correct goals. They are not willing to discuss the reasoning behind any of their goals, but are explaining to you why something on your list is incorrect or insignificant. Not to be a homewrecker here, but if this sounds like your partner, leave them. Dump their ass immediately. On the other hand, a green flag would be your partner setting a clear boundary, such as they have a goal of buying a home, and that is a non-negotiable for them. But they are willing to change a compromise on their list in order to meet that goal so that it aligns with something you are willing to compromise on. For example, let's say they had listed a compromise as having a smaller, less expensive wedding in order to save money for a down payment on a home. You have a goal on your list of having a large, expensive wedding with all of your friends and family and food, what have you. A green flag here is if they come to you and say, hey, I still really want to save money for a down payment on a home, but I know a big wedding is really important to you. So let's plan on that big wedding, and instead I'd be willing to compromise by waiting a few more years to buy a new car for myself. Another green flag is if your partner does not understand one of your goals or compromises, but instead of immediately dismissing it, they ask more questions to try and understand why that is a goal for you and why it's important to you. Another thing to keep in mind if you attempt this exercise is that the other person will probably need some time to think about the goals that you presented, the non-negotiables that you listed, and how both of your lists actually stack up against each other. This very well may not be a one and done conversation. It could take place over a few days or weeks, and that is perfectly okay. Try scheduling some fun date nights around these conversations if you can. wine and cheese night at the house, appetizers at your favorite restaurant, whatever floats your boat. Now, this next part is specifically for couples who are planning to live together long term and would like to get married or are already married. If you do not fall into this camp, feel free to jump forward about 5 to 6 minutes. Like I said before, the two of you need to be approaching your finances as a team, and as such, there are a few things that you should be doing periodically as a team. First, we need to be updating our retirement account contributions. Now, this is something that I'm very passionate about. I think that's pretty obvious at this point. But a huge mistake I see quite often with couples is that they treat their retirement accounts as separate entities. Here's the thing. One of you probably has a better employer match. One of you probably has better options within your 401k. One of you probably makes more money than the other. And one of you is probably more likely to stay at the same company longer than the other one. By not approaching retirement savings as a team, you are likely missing out on some crucial free money. Let me give you an example of a couple, Leslie and Steve. Steve gets a 50% match up to 4% from his employer, and he makes $50,000 a year. He plans on staying at this company for 5 years, and the vesting schedule, how much of the employer match he gets to keep, dictates that he is 100% vested after 3 years, meaning Steve gets to keep 100% of the employer match after he stays with the company for 3 years. If you need a refresher on 401k vesting, you can check out my episode explaining all things 401k here. Leslie, on the other hand, makes more money, $80,000 a year, and her employer match is 6% dollar for dollar. Leslie tends to stay with companies for 2 years before moving on to better opportunities. Her employer also has a 3-year vesting schedule, and if she leaves before those 3 years, Leslie does not get to keep any of her employer match. If Steve and Leslie are not approaching finances as a team, Steve might only contribute 4% of his salary to his 401k because he needs the rest of his salary for shared and individual expenses. That means he would be contributing $2,000 a year to his 401k, and his employer would be contributing $1,000. 50% of Steve's contribution. On the other hand, Leslie is contributing 6% to her 401k because she has more money left over after they pay for shared expenses. That means she would be contributing $4,800 a year, and her employer would be matching that $4,800 dollar for dollar. However, Leslie ends up leaving the company after 2 years and loses her entire $4,800 employer match. This leaves the couple with $7,800 in collective retirement savings, $2,000 contribution from Steve, $1,000 employer match from Steve's company, and $4,800 in contributions from Leslie. What if Steve and Leslie switched around the accounts these contributions are going into while still contributing the same amount as a team? Between the two of them, contributions totaled $6,800. In order to max out Steve's employer match, he would need to contribute 8% of his salary, which comes out to $4,000. Because he contributed 8%, his employer will match 50% of that, which comes out to $2,000. This leaves $2,800 for Leslie to contribute. Her match will now only total $2,800. Same exact scenario as before. Leslie leaves the company after 2 years while Steve stays at his job. This means Steve has $4,000 in contributions, a $2,000 employer match he gets to keep, and Leslie has $2,800 in contributions. They now collectively have $8,800 in retirement savings, an extra $1,000 saved in just 1 year just by rerouting some of the money. For those of you sitting there saying, but what if we don't end up with each other in the long run? I don't want to have less saved in my retirement account and then end up having less overall. Please wait until my controversial statement segment in a few minutes and I will clear up that question for you. Next, you need to be checking in periodically to make sure your goals and compromises are still in line with each other. This could be once a year, once a quarter, whatever makes the most sense for you as a couple. These are more than likely going to change over time as we mature and grow and life throws shit at us. Checking in with yourself to see if your goals have changed is important to make sure that your habits and routines are lending themselves to achieving those goals. And it is vital to make sure you and your partner are updating each other and discussing any changes in those goals. If one of you has done a 180 and swapped around lots of goals while the other one has more or less stayed on the same path, a deeper conversation needs to be had to make sure each of you feels supported. For example, if you both decided that you wanted to hustle while you're young and work 60-hour weeks so that you can retire early, but then kids came along and one of you has decided that they want to stay home with the kids while they are still young, there are some major shifts that will need to take place in both long-term goals and your overall lifestyle. This is absolutely something that can be overcome. In fact, lots of couples have dealt with this exact situation. It's all about communication with your partner. Finally, dividing up financial tasks can be super helpful to both parties. If one person really enjoys paying the bills and keeping on top of daily expenses, while the other person likes to manage the investments within the accounts and calculate how much money should be put into retirement accounts, it makes the most sense to divide and conquer those tasks. Now, you should absolutely keep open communication and share with each other any major changes that are proposed, but overall, splitting out those tasks can keep both people happier than making everyone do all of the tasks for their own specific accounts. One quick note here, for myself and other couples that I know, it does tend to be the case that one person enjoys doing all things money and finance, while the other person would just rather not deal with any of it. I actually don't think that this is an issue. Again, just make sure the person who does not enjoy the money handling is still being made aware of what is going on. And that person can help by picking up household duties that the money person might be slacking on. Okay, I told you I was going to rapid fire off some controversial thoughts I have specifically within romantic relationship. So let's get started with my most controversial statement. If you are planning on getting married, you should combine your bank accounts and credit cards with the person you're intending to marry. The whole separate bank accounts for personal use, joint accounts for combined expenses, and spouses Venmoing each other after getting a meal is absolutely ridiculous. You are literally just telling the world that you are planning on getting divorced. Your actions are preparing yourself for divorce. I do understand the logic behind it. You want to keep some semblance of independence and privacy, and you don't want to get over financially. Here's the thing. If you do not trust your partner with your money, if you do not trust them to not you over, if you do not trust them to not fall in love with somebody else at some point in the future, if you do not trust that you and this person are going to be together until death, don't get married. You should not legally bind yourself to that person if you think any of that. There is no shame in not getting married. It is 2024. I think I can safely say that not one person gives a rat's ass whether or not you are married, aside from your grandma. And sorry, but granny's approval is not a good reason to marry someone. Here's the thing, if you don't want to get married to this person, which is perfectly fine, then you can keep your finances separate. No skin off anyone's back. If you don't want to combine finances, don't legally bind yourself to this person. Period. The exact same logic applies to separating out combined expenses and individual expenses. I'm sorry, but this is just the most crazy shit I have ever heard of when it comes to marriage. You are literally telling the love of your life, the person that you just declared till death do us part, that you will help pay for shared expenses like rent and utilities, but the rest of the money that I make, it's mine and you can't have any. It's just not giving team behavior. Again, there's nothing wrong with wanting to keep your money for yourself, and you can absolutely be a one-man team if you want to. Just don't get married. That's all. That's my controversial thoughts. I know y'all will sound off in the comments, so please have fun with that one. Now, none of these next statements really have anything to do with money, but it is our Valentine's Day episode, and I'm feeling a little feisty right now, if you couldn't tell. So I just want to put these out in case anybody needs to hear them. If you have a gut feeling that your partner has cheated on you, they probably have, and you should leave them. If your partner has cheated on you in the past but swears they've changed, no, they haven't, dump them. You deserve better. If you've ever gone on a break or seriously thought about breaking up with your partner, I don't think you belong together. Go find someone who can actually hold your attention. If someone is pressuring you into doing anything that you are uncomfortable with and they know you are uncomfortable with it, leave them and maybe hide a piece of fruit somewhere in their house to rot and attract fruit flies. On a more serious note, I think I can safely and unfortunately say that as a woman, either you or someone you know has had to put up with toxic relationships, toxic men, and potentially worse within relationships, either in the past or in the present. Please just know that you are not alone. You deserve better. You did not do anything to deserve this. And there are resources to help you along the way. I'll put some helplines and resources in the description below, and if you have to utilize these today, just know that you are stronger than you could ever possibly imagine. I'm rooting for you, and you have people that support you. If you were hoping for a fun, bubbly, cute episode today, sorry. I will be back on Thursday with something much more lighthearted. In the meantime, please hit that subscribe or follow button and binge on some past episodes. Later, rich girls.